Hi, and welcome to Season 10, Episode 5 of My Words Our Journey, the podcast. I'm Monty, your host and author. As a refresher, Ink is getting very close with Presley's family. He's also found something that Grace feels is evidence in her murder. And when we finished the last episode, Grace had taken care of a few contractors, who probably wouldn't be coming back anytime soon. Let's start today with Chapter 22, Don't Get Close. Ink was at a crossroads of sorts. He was getting closer to Presley's family, and he liked them. He felt they liked him too. That wasn't the problem. The problem was what Grace had told him the night before he drank beers with Bob. Don't get close. A little late for that, he thought, and then he swore he heard a grunt or something in the room. Grace never said anything. On top of that, he hadn't heard anything about his cell phone. Hadn't found one either. He wasn't having a good day. He was feeling the weight. He was sweeping and mopping before the office and general store closed when Presley came bouncing through the door. I had an idea. Have anything going on after work? It was polite she asked, he thought, but she knew Ink didn't have anything going on, and if he did, he would drop it in a hot second. I spent the last couple hours picking YouTube videos for us to watch together. A few snacks, drinks. Tonight's topic, Best of Rock. We're going to watch some videos. AC/DC, The Stones, Van Halen, Led Zeppelin, and a few others I tossed in for debate. You up for it? Ink was up for it for sure. The floor was spotless, the doors locked, and they were holding hands when she led him off to the left of the campground. He didn't resist, but he was curious, to the point his heart began to race, his palms a little sweatier. Was she taking him to... Then, after a short walk down a narrow path, the area opened up. It was a mowed field, smaller than a football field, but not by much. In the middle, a large blanket, a couple of small coolers, a white sheet somehow suspended like a movie screen, and her computer and some vices attached. Several other swimming friends were there as well. Ink let out a breath he had been holding. He was better in a group setting. He didn't feel like he could carry on the conversation. He wasn't from her world, and he knew that she'd realize that sooner or later. But, until then, he was happy to spend as much time with her as the Lord would allow. He hadn't noticed at first, but then there were 2 large speakers and a couple of small ones surrounding the blankets. There was music playing, but it was from someone's playlist off their cell phone. Then, Presley yelled, "Let's get some rock going, shall we? It's my party. I say we start at the top of the mountain with one and only Led Zeppelin." Couple of clicks on the computer, the screen and the speakers came to life. For the next couple hours, the group laughed, did a little drinking, listened to some great music, and at last Ink watched in amazement as the bands like Aerosmith, Led Zeppelin, AC/DC, Van Halen. He really liked rock music, he decided, pretty early on. The hair, the aggressive guitars, the catchy lyrics. It, just worked. When the night was winding down, Presley walked over to the computer, laughed and said, "Mixing it up for the last 2 songs, because I can." With one click, Aerosmith went into a slow song that he guessed was called Don't Want to Miss a Thing. Then, that was followed up by a band called Foreigner, and they sang, "I Want to Know What Love Is." Couples began to dance, slowly, immediately, as if on cue. Ink had never danced, fast or slow. But for his first time, he thought he did pretty well. He and Presley didn't speak much, they just held each other, both knowing this, whatever it was, could only end one way. It had been a great evening. He was so glad he had been asked to attend the concert Presley had put on. Some had headed back home. A few stayed to help clean up. Ink hadn't noticed until then. Off to the eastern corner of the field, just past where the mowing stopped and nature took over, he could make out the front end of a boat, then another. While the others finished cleaning up, he found himself standing at the edge of the tall weeds. There were dozens of boats, some sail, some speed, some pontoon. From the distance, he heard someone yell from the group, Don't get too close. Chapter 23. Watercraft Burial Ground. Presley's friend they call Whiskers explained jet skis, a few kayaks, and a lot of boats had, well, been put here, in a burial ground of sorts. Their parents had explained it. It was only meant to be a holding spot until the unwanted crafts would be picked up and taken somewhere. Somewhere never happened. The lot size grew, and finally the owners of the campground stopped the dropping off of the boats, but they also had no interest in paying to have the lot cleared. So, there they sat. Now, some liked to spread rumors that the lot was haunted. Others talked about the huge snakes that had made the vessels their home. Ink listened very intently. He found it all very interesting. When everyone was gone, and he was walking back towards Presley's, she mentioned that her family's boat and at least 2 jet skis were buried somewhere in amongst the trees and weeds. They made plans for the following day, kissed goodnight, and Ink started back towards the general store, where he left his backpack. He still had not purchased his bike, but he would soon. As he was about to cross the road and leave the campground, Grace spoke. "You have to go inside. It's important." Ink froze in place. He knew exactly what she meant. He measured his tone. I am not, under any circumstances, going in there. With the same measured tone, it is important. 5 minutes later, Ink found himself standing basically in the same place he had a couple minutes ago, learning about the rich folks and their boat burial ground. Grace was sure there was something important located in there. She was so sure. How could he say no after he promised he'd help? But he really hated snakes. Grace had promised she'd be with him the entire time. She would handle any snakes or whatever else they might encounter. He had watched her handle the contractors, so it was hard for him not to put his faith in her. Faith was important to him, so he took his first step. The thought of putting his foot down and having no idea what he was stepping on was scary, but with each step, his confidence grew. It was late. He was tired. But every time he felt his strength level at its lowest, Grace would thank him or say something inspirational. Stepping on the third boat, like the others, covered in growth, spiderwebs, and dirt, Grace said, "This is it. This is the one." After just over an hour of searching, it wasn't the one. He had checked every inch of the boat. Nothing. His flashlight caught something behind the boat, though, up close to the motor. There were 2 jet skis on a trailer. They were both red. He could tell they had been expensive when they were new. What must that feel like, he wondered. Ink carefully stepped down between the 2 onto the trailer. In his world, people didn't have these kind of rich toys. Like the others, he checked all the pockets, glove boxes. But when he removed the seat cover off the second, he saw something tucked up behind the drive shaft. When he pulled it out, he held a plastic bag with what looked like a cell phone inside. Ink was excited and freaked out at the same time. He had seen an old registration on the boat, quickly went back to check. He had been right. That's when he heard a voice, not Grace's, but the voice yelled, "Who's out there? I have a gun. My wife will be calling the police if I'm not back in 2 minutes." It sounded like Merkel to Ink. There was no way to explain why he was there, so he ignored the question, turned off the light, and waited. He would not dare trying to get off the boat without the light. He would surely break a leg. They were both quiet, neither making a sound. Ink waited. Then, he thought he heard him hastily leaving. He could be gone in 5 minutes. He waited. He waited a little longer. Silence. He knew it would take the man longer than 5 minutes to get back to his place. He'd have to risk it. He turned the flashlight back on, climbed off the boat, in between the skis, stopped, listened, then moved with purpose until he reached the clearing. Then his strong young legs kicked in. He was long gone within a couple of minutes. As he crossed the road, out to the park, he could hear the dogs off in the distance begin to bark. With sarcasm, he said to Grace, "Thanks for the help." Chapter 24. Just be positive. He had been too tired the night before. He just couldn't look at the phone or think about whose property he'd found it on. The morning brought a new day, new opportunities, but it also still left the secrets of the night before. He held the phone in his hand. He convinced himself it was a man's, the phone color, black, the large, manly, protective, waterproof case. So, that was a relief. He didn't want it to be any of the child's family. Easily could have been planted, but he was sure that it wasn't Presley's. But if it was planted, why? He had no idea. Maybe when, if he could get into the phone, he might find answers. While he didn't have a phone of his own, he was aware of the latest tech. He read anything and everything he found. And while he didn't have a photogenic memory, he was close. When he unwrapped the phone from the bubble wrap, Ink wondered why someone would take such good care of a phone that they had planted or hidden. It couldn't be the killers, right? That would be a high risk. He was surprised when not only the phone but a charging cord fell out of the plastic and onto his jacket. All he could say was, "Wow." Both pieces lay next to his jacket. He thought about what could possibly be on that phone that could help him. At the end of every scenario, he came back to, why keep the phone? Why would anyone keep the phone? Ink was 15 minutes early for his shift. He was so excited to plug the phone in and see what would happen. He was aware the phone could belong to anyone, so he'd be discreet when charging it. An hour after he'd found an out-of-the-way plug, he worked his way back to that section with his mop in hand. The light was green. The screen had come to life. It was a picture of a football stadium. Ink had seen it before, but in different weather, he thought. It took a little time before he realized he was looking at the iconic Lambeau Field. "It's his phone," Grace whispered, emphasizing the word his. Ink remembered as well. Bob was a huge Packers fan. Flags, banners, towels, you name it, they had it, and it had Packers all over it. It didn't mean it was his, but it did strongly suggest the fact. Ink had watched Presley with her phone and knew there were a few different ways to open it, and the apps. Grace said, "You're alone. Try opening the phone. You need a password." Ink thought for a minute and then tried 9221. Didn't work. So then he tried 2192. And to his utter surprise, it worked. He was in the phone. Grace reassured him he was still alone. What if someone realizes it's gone? "I'll be with you as we go through the phone. It's important. There's something there that can help." Ink wanted to be positive as Grace, he thought. Just then, she said, "Well then just be positive." Ink laughed and said, "Done." Chapter 25. Balance. Presley was planning more and more things for the couple to do. The unspoken truth, their time was short. They both felt like there was something special between them. But their ages, her bright future, him happy living in a treehouse, it didn't seem like that was the kind of thing that would work out in the end. Still, he couldn't say no. They were spending enough time together that a few other campers, as well as Nancy, had made comments. They weren't the only ones that had a word to say about Ink and Presley. Grace was not happy. Her feelings had been made clear. He was not holding up his end of the bargain. He had barely looked at the phone since finding it. Was it fear of what he might find? Maybe. They decided to start with the photos stored on the phone. He was only a few pics in when he heard the walkie-talkie. "Hey there, can we do something this afternoon?" Instinctively, Ink reached for the walkie, his hand pushed back by the invisible force that was Grace. "You need to focus, at least for a couple hours, please." "Hi there. Sure, I can come over to the RV in about 2.5 hours. Grace still wasn't thrilled, he could tell, but they worked together going through the photos. He caught himself forgetting Grace wasn't physically in the room with him at times. End to end, it was just pictures. Campground, the lake, some random boats. Some faraway pictures of young people playing. A few out-of-focus shots that they agreed could be anything, except for something that would help them. There was a few minutes before he had to leave, so he moved over to the text messages, There was a lot of texts. Over the walkie, Ink, you still there? Yes. Great. Pack what you need. Dad said it's okay if we camp outside tonight. Clear sky, should be amazing view. Okay, leave soon. Bye. Ink had asked Grace to stay behind. He wasn't sure if she even planned to go. He didn't know how it all worked. But he knew having Grace reminding him that he needed to be helping her instead of enjoying the company of his girlfriend did not sound fun. So, she was sure about the phone. He felt bad, but there was no way to make both sides happy. But he was going to keep trying. Balance, he thought. I just have to balance. More like juggling, he decided. And let's stop there for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode of My Words, Our Journey, the podcast. Have a great day, and thank you for listening.